If you're trying to market yourself or your business on social media, there's so much noise. There's so many screaming heads. There's so much information. The algorithms are working against you, and oftentimes it feels like you're just underwater. And so that simple statement of, instead of trying to push through the crowd, what if you just went around it? What I want to share is that I believe in humanity. I believe in our extraordinary intelligence and our extraordinary capacity to create and collaborate. And if I could do anything to support others in believing in themselves, then I feel like I will have done my job.
Hello boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, this is Nishant and welcome to the Nishant Garg show. I am on a mission to help you live mindful days, and my job on the show is to invite the world-class experts to extract the practices, routines and habits to help you live a fulfilled and abundant life. Mental fitness is the new physical fitness, and how we get mentally fit is now the hottest ticket in wellness and performance. That is where my today's guest Cara Bradley steps in. Cara is a mental fitness coach, and she has spent 3 decades training high performers, including CEOs and elite athletes, to work and play in optimal states of flow using science-backed practices and protocols. In 2020, she was nominated as one of Mindful Magazine's 12 Powerful Women in the Mindfulness Movement. Her best-selling book, On the Verge, Wake Up, Show Up, and Shine, was featured on Oprah.com. You can find her trainings featured on wellness brands including Insight Timer, Muse, Happify, Whil Concepts, Mindful Magazine, and most recently Round Glass. In this episode, Cara goes deep into explaining peak performance secrets, how to work and play in optimal states of flow, what is slow cycle, gut-brain connection, how to reset and recover, and much, much more. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Cara. Cara, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Nishant. It's great to be here.
It's great to be here with you as well. So it's the morning time. And so, Cara, what did you have in the breakfast?
Oh, well, I practice intermittent fasting. So generally I don't have breakfast till about 11, but I do have my coffee in the morning. So that I've had.
What kind of coffee?
Just regular American coffee with half and half. I'm a pretty simple gal. I've tried all the fancy stuff and the bulletproof and this and that, but I just like a good old cup of American coffee.
Do you add sugar in that?
No sugar.
Tell us more about the intermittent fasting. So how many hours do you fast before you eat your next meal?
I try to practice. It's pretty standard 16-8. So it means that you go 16 hours before you break your fast. So if you eat dinner about 7, then it's usually about 11 or 12, gets you to about 16 hours. And it just allows your body to take a break, and your digestion. We spend so much energy digesting food. So if your body doesn't have to focus on digesting food, it can repair and heal in other ways. So it works for me. I don't do it every day. I'm not really orthodox about anything besides just living fully. So I try to practice moderation and not be too strict on any practice.
What have you gained from intermittent fasting? What changes have you seen in your personal life?
I think I have more energy. Especially in the mornings. It's my most creative time. And I do spend most of the early morning to mid-morning getting my most important tasks done, those MITs. And, as they say, you want to eat the ugly frog first. So I try to eat the ugly frog, that big project, that thing that is like always nagging at your mind. I try to get that kind of stuff done. And I just find that being light and feeling light in my body, it's helpful for me to stay in that creative mode.
What time do you wake up in the morning?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, Nishant, because my husband and I used to get up between 4 and 4:30 for
Wow.
years. Yeah, I mean, I wrote my book between 4:30 and 9:30. And so I was really very consistent with that. And then the pandemic hit and we found ourselves starting to turn off the alarm clock and just letting our bodies wake up naturally. And so now it's usually between 5 and 6. And I have to tell you, I feel a lot better. I think just getting that extra hour of sleep has been remarkable for, again, healing and balancing and cleansing. So, I look back and I'm like, how did I do that for so many years?
So, Kara, how many hours do you sleep now?
I try to get 8 hours, but it's usually between 7 and 8. Sometimes it's a little over 8, but I do really try to get that 8 hours because we've learned so much about sleep in the last few years and the research behind sleep that I think it was the gentleman who wrote the book, Why We Sleep. He's a British doctor. And he said, Matthew, something. He said, we're fooling ourselves if we think that we can get on or get by with less than 8 hours. But the research really does tell us that we are at our optimized state when we've had several days of 8 hours of sleep.
What advice would you give to somebody who thinks sleeping is not for me?
Yeah, I would say give it a try because I was pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries and thought I could, get more done and all that kind of, sort of badass mentality. But when I really started to experience sleep, there's nothing like waking up and having your mind cleared. And what we're learning is that in REM is really this, it's like a cleansing for your mind, that your mind is able to work through and clear out a lot of debris. And so you wake up with this clarity that sets you on your day like nothing else. So I would say just give it a try. Give it a try for a couple of months. Why not? Just be your own experiment and see how you feel.
Kara, do you have any other practice in your life to cleanse your mind?
Oh yeah, I've got tons of those. I've spent my life trying to understand my mind. I can't say I'm there, but I am trying. And so I have a slew of practices, and most of them happen early morning. When I first wake up, I set the direction of my day before I even get out of bed with some intentions. And my intentions aren't, I want to do this, I want to get this done. They're not goal oriented. What I try to do, or what I do, is to sit with myself and allow myself to experience the qualities of being that I'd like to embody during the day. So for instance, most often my intentions are to experience vitality and vigor, to experience abundance and generosity, and to experience positivity out there. I just to be a light in the world. So before I get out of bed, I set my mind in that direction. Because if we don't set our mind, will have we will be at the beck and call of the world, the outer world. So I want to be able to be in control, and I use that word lightly, of the direction of my mind instead of allowing the circumstances of the outer world, which I have no control over, to dictate where my mind goes. So that's an important practice for me and something I adopted just in the last few years. And then I always do some type of meditation practice. And I have many different types of meditation practices that I'll explore in the morning, and then some type of breath work, and then some journaling, and then I'm off to the races.
I would love to ask you, you mentioned about setting intention. So you work on this setting intention practice while in your bed,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you wake up and you do some meditation. You also said that you have
Yes.
many meditation practices. Could you suggest some of the practices that you have?
Yes, of course. Sometimes I'll just sit with a very simple mindful meditation practice. I use the Muse. The Muse is a brain sensing headband that sometimes I'll put that on just to see what my brain waves are like. And so that's a very simple meditation practice. They have some guided practices. I actually have done some guided practices for them. I also practice non-dual awareness practices, which is a little bit deeper, a little more advanced. I practice also some deity practices, which is a Vajrayana, so getting more into the Tibetan Buddhism sect. I'll practice some deeper, more consciousness expanding practices. So, but I don't, like I said before, I don't hold strict to anything. I sense into where I'm at in the morning and what's going to best serve me to help me walk into my day most awake and aware.
How did you get started in meditation practice in your life?
Well, as an athlete, as a young athlete, I was a competitive figure skater, and then I was a competitive runner. I had a lot of time in my own head and in my body, and I became aware of how my body and mind either worked together or didn't work together. And so as a young athlete, I had no tools. I just had my own experience to play with. And I remember when I was 20 years old, I had a real life-changing experience on a track during my last 800 race. And I experienced myself in flow. I didn't know it at the time, but I vividly remember having no thoughts, having just this incredibly intense sensory experience of my body and having no fear. And after that race where I absolutely smashed my personal record, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what happened, and I wanted to be able to recreate it. And so I went on a search. That was the beginning of my hero's journey in many ways. And I went on a search of practices and disciplines that would allow me to experience that on demand so that I wasn't just waiting until my very last race or a very big moment in my life. I was actually able to train. And so what I found was yoga and meditation. And that began my journey of those practices.
What did you learn from that life-changing experience?
That's a great question. I think the biggest lesson for me, and it was so profound, is that I felt more like myself than I had felt in a long, long time. Now, I was young. I was 20 years old. But what I experienced was, and I had to sit with it for a while. It wasn't completely obvious to start, but it was like a remembering of how I used to feel as a child. It was a remembering of how I moved in the world without that inner critic overwhelming my experience with doubt, fear, judgment, negative self-talk. Because that was lifted in this flow state, I experienced this freedom and this spontaneous joy that I hadn't experienced since I was young. And that lesson made me realize that this isn't just me or available to me. This is actually available to every single one of us, has the opportunity to shift beyond or below or whatever works for you, but to really allow ourselves to experience ourselves in this natural state of aliveness. And it's right there for the taking in every single moment of our lives. And so from that point on, I spent my time studying the body and mind and consciousness and awareness and flow states and optimized states so that I could experience it again. And in so doing, I also became motivated and inspired to share it with others. as a teacher.
What is the difference between flow state and optimized state?
Well, one of the definitions of flow, as Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who's our kind of founding father of optimized states, he calls flow an optimized state of consciousness. And we could take it all the way back to Maslow, who talked about peak experience. So in many ways, there is no difference. Flow is a spectrum of optimized states. So it's not one state. It's not an on or off switch. It's a spectrum of what could be a very mellow, deeply embodied experience of peace and connection with everything. It could be a heightened sensory experience of being on the edge of danger where your mind is completely awake. So there is a full spectrum that's available to all of us. And so there's different gateways into experiencing and accessing flow. Some people are more likely to be on, scaling a mountain. Some others they find flow when they're in a crowd. Well, when we used to be in a crowd, but immersed in music or in some type of presentation. And other people find their access or their gateway deep in the woods or deep in meditation.
How do you find your flow?
Oh, I have so many ways. And that is the delight and the joy of this journey of discovery. Over the last bunch of years, I've been studying with and working with two of our real flow experts in our world these days. One lives in your hometown of Austin, and his name is Jamie Whil. And the other is Stephen Kotler, and they've written a book together on flow. And I've done a lot of study with those two gentlemen and also working with them in training other people to discover flow. So it's been so much fun because we experiment. And this is a beautiful community of experimenters. So we practice with different breath work. We practice with different states of physicality. We practice with deep embodiment and being in deep nature and big nature and high consequences. So we're constantly looking at this multifaceted gem of optimized experience from different facets, from different angles. And so there's just an infinite number of ways to experience optimized state. And, honestly, Nishant, one of the ways that I experience flow is doing this with you, is just being in communion with someone else, speaking about, these outer edges of our consciousness and experiences.
And I find flow when I do the podcast editing.
Oh, wow. I love that. So how are you just like sensing into what where to cut, where to pull, what to highlight? Tell me. I'm curious.
So when I got started with the podcast, it was challenging me. It was challenging for me to be comfortable with my own voice. Now, at this point, I enjoy my own voice. I enjoy learning from other guests. And just a flow. Sometimes it's difficult to explain that flow state. You just feel it in your mind, body. It's a connection. It's a beautiful connection, mind, body, spirit connection.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. That's it. And you have a lovely voice, by the way.
Thank you. So, Cara, before we move forward, I would love to ask you, how does your husband explain what you do for a living?
That's a great question. Well, we work together, and we have worked together for many, many years as entrepreneurs. We've run businesses together. And so our work is our life, and our life is our work. And it's a continuous exploration of collaboration, creativity, and really pushing out of boundaries of what's possible. And that's how we met. We'll be married 30 years in January. So I feel very fortunate to have a life partner that can explore this with me. And so when he's explaining what I do, he's explaining what he does as well, which is really to help people come alive and to learn how to experience their body and their brain in optimized ways. And we have several businesses, one being a mental wellness business that we're building right now, which is based on healing the gut. And when we heal our gut, what we're learning in science, it's new science of the gut-brain connection, we can set ourselves up for more optimal living, for more clarity, more energy, more focus, less anxiety. And this is a big piece of the puzzle, not only personally, but professionally, that has just come to me in the last couple of years. It's super exciting.
Have you done anything with gut healing in your personal life?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for the last couple of years, I've been understanding the microbiome, and it's a new field of science. It's less than 10 years old, and there's so much research that's showing how most illness is rooted in our gut, and specifically mental health issues is rooted in our gut. And that doesn't have to mean, far-reaching depression and anxiety. It could mean just chronic fatigue, which is something I've experienced, adrenal fatigue. And so in discovering my own stress levels and in healing myself in how I recover, hence the sleep and the breathing and the fasting and a lot of these different things I've been experimenting with, I've also been able to help a lot of other people. And the gut and our gut health and our gut-brain connection is a major, major piece of how we heal ourselves mentally and physically.
I'm deep in the ignorance pool of gut-brain connection. Could you explain more on this part? Because if somebody wants to learn more and really wants to heal their life through gut-brain connection for optimal well-being, how should they get started and why? Why we need this?
Great question. And I love talking about this. And what I'll say, just to simply explain the gut-brain connection, is that our bodies are mostly non-human microbes, is what we're learning. We are made up mostly of bacteria and viruses. And we didn't know this until the Human Genome Project that took place a decade ago. And so now we're finding out and learning and discovering that when our gut microbiome, which houses most of these microbes and viruses, when that's out of balance, it throws all of our systems out of balance, including our mental wellness and our mental fitness, is what I talk about a lot these days. And so how do we heal our gut? Well, let's just talk about quickly how our gut gets imbalanced. Firstly, medication will throw our body into imbalance. Environmental factors, poor food, which most of us cannot possibly eat enough diversity in our food sources because our food sources are just not optimal anymore. So poor food, environment, medicine, and stress. So that just about brings us all into this equation, right, in some degree. So some of the ways that we can heal and we can start to what's called modulate the microbiome, which means to rebalance, is reducing our stress, is reducing the environmental stressors, is obviously avoiding medication when possible, and it's not always possible. It's improving our nutrition by eating more diverse food. And also what I have found to be the key factor for me is through supplementation, through naturally naturally introducing a more diverse micronutrients and bacteria probiotics into my body that can help my microbiome start to rebalance so that all the other systems, including the immune system and our nervous system and our hormonal system, all that starts to improve when the gut microbiome is improved. And so what I believe is going to happen, and I'm not saying this because I am an expert, but because so many experts have said it, is that the future of our well-being is really stored it's sourced from our gut. And because so many of our neurotransmitters, including serotonin and dopamine and GABA and all of these feel good and motivational sources that speak to our brain via these different systems, because most of them are produced and stored in the gut. When we heal our gut, we start to feel better and we feel happier. And this has been the case for me over the last few years.
What are some of the supplementations you are using?
Well, I work directly with a company that has created a specific, very targeted line of micronutrients to specifically heal the gut-brain connection. And so this company introduces specific bacteria that's been clinically validated in humans to reduce the effects of stress, to alleviate anxiety, to increase focus. So some of these nutrients, including these very targeted micro or prebiotics and probiotics, help you to feel better. And when you start feeling better, you start to shift other things in your life, like sleep, like meditation, like better food choice, like more movement. So these micronutrients and phytonutrients, and you can call them psychobiotics as well, really are helping us to move the needle so that we start to make other changes in our lives. So it's not a magic pill, and there are no magic pills, but when we can heal one area and start to feel better in one area, it's like a domino effect. Everything starts to change. And this is why I'm so excited about sharing this information with other people. Because for many years, I've been teaching body practices, physical disciplines. I've been teaching mental practices and mental strength training. And now this last piece, which is the biome piece, fits perfectly together for this beautiful combination of mental fitness strategies that I love talking about. So thank you for that opportunity.
Sure. Can we find the supplement online?
Yeah, you just reach out to me, actually, is the best way to understand, because I really teach the full picture. I help to support people in understanding the full common sense approach to wellness and the mental wellness protocol that I'm talking about is a piece of the puzzle. So I like to support everybody in the full picture, which includes stress reduction, sleep hygiene, functional movement, and being out in nature and understanding nutrition.
Cara, I would love to ask you that. You may decide not to answer this question if you think that you're not comfortable. Is there any area in your life that you find most challenging to elevate your peak performance?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to talk about it, because if I can help anybody else identify their kind of dark corners, if you will, then that's what we're doing. Ram Dass, I love his quote. He said, "We're all just walking each other home." And so by me sharing my struggles, if it helps somebody else identify their struggles, then that's how we walk each other home. So for me, I founded a yoga studio 16 years ago called Verge Yoga, and it grew over 16 years to be really a beautiful community and a beautiful business. And we created a methodology of helping people find that body-mind synchronization, that sense of body-mind unity through movement, through breath, through mindfulness. And I sold the business in December of 2019, actually December 31st. And I sold the business after 16 years of running a business. And what I've identified over the last 2 years is that I was living with chronic low-level stress from running a business. And it was silent, right? It was like an invisible gas. As a small business owner, and I'm sure that there are small business owners listening out there, entrepreneurs, people that have started a venture, there is so much weight that you carry, even if it's a yoga business. And here I am, out there running this yoga and mindfulness business. And I've authored a book and I'm speaking. I'm out on the corporate circuit speaking about optimized states. Meanwhile, I'm living with this stress. And the stress was starting to rear its ugly head in forms of interrupted sleep, weight gain that I'd never experienced, brain fog, irritability, heart palpitations. And I'm doing everything right. I'm meditating, I'm practicing yoga, I'm doing all these optimizing practices, yet there was this invisible gas running through me. And because of the work that I was doing, it was hard for me to talk about. It was hard for me to talk about even to my family. And I think that I would sense that there are a lot of us wellness experts, and I'm doing the air quotes, that are suffering from the stress of running a business, having employees, having rent, having to deal with the just everyday pressure of having to perform. And yet, if we're not able to talk about our mental health issues, we shoved them down as I was doing, and they were festering in me. And so just even in the last year and a half, as I've started to address my microbiome, I've been able to identify these areas and make big changes in these areas. So I love talking to high performers and optimizers and hackers and type A's like me, and I put myself in that class, about really identifying and exposing the stress that you're living with, because it's not healthy.
What was causing your stress and mental issues in your business?
Well, it's everyday common stress. I had at any one point 40 employees. I had a business that was closed one day a year, Christmas Day. A business that was opened from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. So just that alone, that need to be on, was creating this low-level agitation, right? The low-level anticipation of the call, of the text, something went wrong, someone didn't show up, some, customer is complaining, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it happens in any business. Just because it's a yoga business doesn't mean it's all roses. So just even that created low-level stress. And then it was just the intensity of having a lot of competition over the last 16 years, this influx of these industrialized fitness businesses. I'm not going to name them, but we had like massive 100,000 square foot gyms open up on either side of us, basically, in the last couple of years. So that intensity, and it's stressful. It's absolutely stressful. The stress of being out there as an author and a speaker, it was a lot for me, and being a parent and all the other things.
You have mentioned about your book, and I would like to say the book name, On the Verge, Wake Up, Show Up, and Shine. And in this book, you have one practice called sky gazing. Can you talk about this practice?
I love sky gazing. I'm so glad you brought that up, Nishant. Sky gazing is a practice I learned from my meditation teacher, Scott McBride. I still do weekly classes because there's so much mind expanding, heart expanding work for me to still do. And sky gazing comes out of Tibetan Buddhism, and it is a way of expanding your consciousness by just simply sitting or standing or walking and finding your own piece of sky. So you can do it looking out the window. You bet preferably you're outside, and you allow your awareness, your visual sense to expand. And a lot of times it's coupled with the breath. So you could inhale the expansiveness of what you're seeing and exhale struggle, tension, worry. Inhale, you pull in this beautiful, expansive, open sky and allow it to fill you, allow it to open you up even more, and exhale anything that is holding you down, pulling you down, making you struggle. You don't have to identify it in name, you can, but it truly is giving yourself the opportunity to allow the sky and the limitlessness of the sky to work its way into you, to help you not feel so constricted and small. And it only takes a few minutes if you like. And I love to do it every day. I love to get myself a little bit of sunshine every day and just sit, and if it's sunny out, just sit and allow the sun and the sky to heal me, to work its way through me. You know, we don't have to do this on our own. So often, we feel like Sisyphus, pushing the rock up the hill over and over every day. Every day, I got to push this rock up the hill. But we have the resources of nature, of the sky, of the air, of each other, of food, of quiet, of stillness, of movement, of music, all of these beautiful opportunities and facets of this gem to help us, to work us instead of us always having to work.
Do you feel that we are living in a grinding mentality culture?
Yes, and that's an understatement. Absolutely. But here we're still in the pandemic, still not out of COVID. I feel like so many of us have found simple ways to enjoy life again. So that is the silver lining. I did a Facebook post a couple of weeks ago, and I just asked, what is one of the positive habits that's come out of COVID for you? Oh my God. The response was just extraordinary. And it was what I heard, or what was written, was mostly simple, free, natural habits. Like, more movement, more sleep, more reading, more cooking, more music, more connecting. It was just beautiful. I loved it. And it was from every walk of life. And we're finding our way back to the simple, the free, the obvious, the available opportunities to connect into source. So, yes, we live in a grinding society, but having this, this stay at home enforced on us has hopefully allowed us, and will hopefully allow us to continue to lean into those very natural ways of connecting into who we are and how to heal.
Yes. Cara, so elevating our performance and getting to the peak performance state is one thing, and sustaining that performance for a long time is another thing. So how can we sustain that performance The graph should not be zigzag. It's got to be sustainable, right?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I'll give you the answer, but in saying in offering you the answer, it doesn't mean that I've got it down. I still work with it very much. So in the flow world, we talk about the flow cycle. And this is what Stephen talks about and Jamie talks about and Csikszentmihalyi talks about, is flow being an optimal state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best is a wonderful thing to strive for and to practice, but we can't sustain it. We can't we can't scale the mountain for 24/7. We've got to come down and recover, or we'll fall and that'll be the end of it. So understanding the flow cycle is crucial for being optimal or being a high performer over time. And the flow cycle has 4 components. And the first one is generally struggle. So we generally find ourselves agitated, uneasy, unsure, uncertain before a breakthrough. And so there's nothing wrong with struggle. In fact, it's often called eustress, EU stress, which is good stress. We've got to push the boundaries. My book on the Verge is about that. It's about recognizing ripe opportunities in life when you are challenged, when you are right there at the edge of what your potential, what you have the potential to do. And when we recognize, this is struggle right now. I'm in struggle with this particular problem or with this project. Then you can allow yourself to sit in the struggle. We don't always realize it until we're kind of halfway through. It's like, oh crap, this is struggle. And usually when we recognize the struggle, soon after, we will have that release. We will just release the struggle. We'll release the complexity of the problem. We'll let go. We'll go take a nap. They often say that Einstein discovered or had these big insights, not when he was at the desk with pen and paper, but when he was napping or in the shower, right? I often have the shower insights. Or when you are, cooking, chopping carrots, it's like, oh my God, there's the answer. So that's the release. So we have the struggle and the working through, and sometimes we have to just let go of the complexity and go do something else. Then we have that release.
Which is tough.
Oh yeah. It's tough to get yourself to do, especially if you're type A like me, because we want to push and grind, ourselves to the ground. Do you feel that way sometimes?
All the time.
Yeah. So noticing and having enough awareness to recognize the struggle and to let yourself let go and just stop and go do something else. Go for a run, wash your face, go eat something, just go cook a meal, walk the dog.
And it's a practice. It's a practice, constant practice to cultivate every day, every time. And we need to develop some awareness that, okay, we are stuck into this thing and we are not having any creative solutions. So let's take a break. Even if it is 5 minutes break, I can speak for myself. Yesterday, I was taking 2 minutes nap, 3 minutes nap, just to break the pattern.
That's right. Well, you got it. You got it, Nishant. You're on it. And sometimes the release is longer, and sometimes it's 2 minutes. It's just stepping away. And then there's the flow. And the flow is the rush. It's the rush of insight. It's the rush of strength. It's the rush of connectivity. When apples and oranges and the things that the lateral thinking comes online and we start to see patterns that we didn't see before in the struggle. All of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, if I do this and this, well then that will work, right? It's the creative patterns. It's and it happens physically. It happens mentally. It happens even beyond the mind, when mind and body are connected and all of a sudden we're making moves physically that we've never made before. And we know what to do at the exact right time. We know what to say at the exact right time. We know how to connect. I mean, this is optimized. And so that's the flow. And so here's the big part, and this is my work. after the flow, we need to recover. The recovery phase is when our body comes back into coherence. It's actually when we heal. We've used up the serotonin. We've used up all these neurotransmitters. Our body needs to reproduce them. There's not just an endless store. We actually need to recover, right? Our muscles need to recover. We need to sleep. We need to take 3 days off. This recovery phase is where
3 days in a weekend? 3 days in a week?
Yeah, sometimes we need massive recovery. Sometimes it's a sabbatical, right? It's a vacation or, a half a day. But knowing that there needs to be recovery time built into your life. Because if there isn't, Nishant, then you're going to find yourself like me, like I was, with this adrenal fatigue that was affecting my immune system, my weight, my energy, my sleep, my ability to focus and connect with others, my mood. Wasn't a pretty picture, but I wasn't recovering. I was grinding it out, like you said.
I can definitely relate to this recovery. And in last 8 months, I can say that on the weekends, I never execute anything. I just think, write, think, repeat. Whatever ideas come, I will just write it down and just letting it flow and not working on any idea. Keeping the weekdays to work on it. Weekend is just for thinking.
Beautiful. So there's the allowing for the emergence to have its way with you in a lot of ways, the emergent intelligence to come through you, and you may write it down, but not act on it. The acting comes during the weekday. Is that right?
Yes. And reviewing your notes, going back what you wrote down 5 months ago. Sometimes it's easy to forget the main ideas. And when we go back, then we realize, okay, this is a great idea that I have never executed. Let me try this. Let me try this hypothesis.
Interesting. Yeah. Love it. That's a great cycle to work with.
And Cara, so what books have inspired you the most, or what books have you gifted the most?
That's a great book. Tao Te Ching, for sure, I'm always going back to it. I'm not a study of Taoism, but I'm not a student, I would say, but I guess I am. I mean, I haven't studied it formally yet, but there's something about that and Wu Wei, just the, natural flow, allowing for the natural flow of life and effortless effort of life to move us. I think, boy, would there be a lot more joy and happiness in our world. So that's not answering your question, but sort of.
Tao Te Ching is a Chinese philosopher for the listeners who may not be aware of that. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, that's an interesting question. Lately, the book I've been gifting a lot is The Gut-Mind Connection by Dr. Emran Mayer, because he was one of the first researchers to put a book out about the specific connection between our gut and our brain. And it's a mind-blowing book. If you don't know anything about the gut-brain connection, it's a great place to start. So I've gifted that most often in the last couple of years. But some of the books that I go back to and I read and reread a lot are the books by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. The Sacred Path of the Warrior, for me, has been just a go-to, highlighted over and over again. And it's a very simple introduction to meditation from really the one of the top teachers from Tibet that has brought the Tibetan Buddhism to the US. And he was the teacher of my teacher. And so I find that to be, and it's a easy read for anybody, and it's profound. It's one of my root books. I have not a lot. I have a handful of books. I call them my root sources. And then I love to read. I'm just looking at my book stack and I'm reading The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, another guy from Austin, actually.
Yeah, I've been following him.
Yeah, he's great. And I'm reading another book called The Healthy Deviant by my friend Pilar Gerasimo, which is about the common sense approach to wellness. We need to take our health into our own hands because we are a sick society. And I love her approach. It's so practical, but very direct and a little radical in her. I love her radical simplicity, I guess I would say.
All right, you mentioned about the book Daily Stoic, and
Yes.
I'm a believer in the Stoicism. I read Stoicism here and there. So
Yes.
what do you have any favorite exercise from Stoicism philosophy?
Yeah. One thing I remember reading in The Obstacle is the Way, also by Ryan Holiday, he talked about, I guess he was, I don't remember which of the Stoics he was mentioning, but it is this idea of instead of trying to move through the crowd, look to move around it. I mean, it's so simple, and it was so profound for me because so many of us, including myself, struggle to get ourselves out there, right? If you're trying to market yourself or your business on social media, there's so much noise. There's so many screaming heads. There's so much information. The algorithms are working against you. And, oftentimes it feels like you're just underwater. And so that simple statement of instead of trying to push through the crowd, what if you just went around it? And so I'm always looking for that way around.
It's doing the opposite. What everybody is doing,
Yes.
try to do the
Yes,
opposite.
exactly. How would you describe that? I'm curious because if you've studied some Stoicism, is that how you would you read that, is just to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing?
In some ways, in one way, I will say that just trust yourself. And before we go into the Stoicism, I will say that one quote from Bhagavad Gita, which is Hindu holy book.
Hmm.
What is meant to be yours will be yours. You will get it, everything at the right time. Just keep efforting. Don't worry about the results. We all know about this, but how do we remind ourselves? How do we practice this? That don't worry about the outcomes. Just keep working on what you love and passionate about the most.
Mm.
Things will happen at the right time. And working around the crowd is that we don't have a control on the crowd. For instance, we are doing this podcast recording. In this 1 hour, I am taking the control. I'm trying to navigate this conversation because I can take control on this conversation to some extent. But how this podcast may turn out is out of my control. So I practice not to be attached to the outcome. How many listeners, how many downloads are going to happen, how many people are going to share. I don't have any control on that. My job is to create a master class that stands the test of time, and I enjoy this experience. I build relationships, just enjoying the process. And Stoicism says that there is a lot of noise in the world. There is a lot of noise. You know, just find handful of mentors and teachers that you really become diehard fans of. And I'm diehard fans of handful of people in my life that whatever I do, whatever they say, whatever they sell or anything, I'm their follower. So my intention is that how can I create those diehard fans, even if they are 50 diehard fans, and I'm doing this podcast only for those 50 to 100 diehard fans. I don't know who they are, but this is for them because I'm not trying to beat the market. I'm trying to carve out my own path, and this is my path. I'm staying in my own lane, and every lane connects to the main destination of this whole universe. This is how I see this.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Long answer.
No, I love that. So can I ask you who are those main teachers for you?
The one teacher that comes to my mind is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Life changer. I started following him 3 years ago when I was struggling so bad in every area of my life. Not financially. Financially, I've been super abundant since I was 23. Financially, I've never had any problem. Emotionally, mentally, I was so much struggling 3 years ago. I had a bad breakup and I just didn't know. And another guy is Coach Corey Wayne. He talks about life philosophy. He talks about relationships. And then Tony Robbins and Tim Ferriss. I relate to people who are like me. I'm highly introverted, that I can literally copy paste their strategies into my life. Sometimes we may not have to reinvent the wheel. Just observe what everybody is doing. When I go onto social media, I go with this observant mind. Okay, what everybody is doing. If I do the opposite, one approach is that one strategy, and I use that a lot every day.
I love it.
For instance, if somebody is posting a good content on the social media, and if they're getting 100, 200 comments, I will avoid posting a comment on that. Unless I have a deep human connection with that person, I will find a post to comment on which has very less number of comments, such as 5, 10, or 20, so that I'm visible. Otherwise, I'm just lost in the crowd.
Interesting.
This is because a lot of people just like the post. When you comment, genuinely comment on somebody's post, then we create this connection. You are going one step further. Whenever I connect with anybody on LinkedIn or Instagram or anywhere, I make sure that I send them a thank you message. It's about deep human connection, and nothing else matters. When there is a connection, there is a trust. You don't have to sell anything.
Yes.
You don't have to. This is what I do it over and over.
Well, you're doing it well. You're doing it well.
Great, Cara. So before we end this conversation, I would love to ask you, where can our listeners find you online?
Well, there's my website, which is carabradley.net. That's Cara with a C.net. And that really will lead you to most of my work. I'm on all social media, except for Twitter. You can only do so much. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn are the three that I focus on the most. And I also have a podcast, and it's a daily podcast. It's a short daily podcast, and it's solo. It's called On the Verge. And these are my morning messages that I offer every single day.
Great. Do you have any closing thought, anything that you want to share?
Well, what I want to share is that I so believe in humanity. I believe in our extraordinary intelligence and our extraordinary capacity to create and collaborate. And if I could do anything to support others in believing in themselves, then I feel like I will have done my job.
Thank you so much, Cara. And thank you so much for asking me those wonderful questions and inviting me back.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful to talk to.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.